Sales today is laden with a litany of different books in the sales canon that cover things like Objections by Jeb Blount. Great book, by the way. Or books like The Sales Bible, or Spin Selling, or Pitch Anything, or Flip the Script. All great books. But you know what they all miss is a unifying framework that instead of being hell-bent, laser focused on evoking from the buyer information that only serves you, things like BANT, SPIN, CHAMP, or any number of these new frameworks that are like MEDIC, MEDPIC, etc., which absolutely have a place in the sales process. The problem is that they're incomplete, okay? And I believe that the reason why 63% of sellers are missing their quota, the reason they're missing their quota is because they are failing on this. And this is what this new novel sales framework is going to address. It's the 5D framework. So let me first set this up and explain why this framework even came to be. Okay, so like I said, take a framework like MEDIC or MEDPIC. Metrics, economic buyer, decision-making criteria, impact or implication, etc. Okay, from the framework. Or SPIN, situation, problem, implication, need, or BANT, budget, authority, need, timing. The problem with all these frameworks is that if they're done wrong, meaning they're delivered to the prospect in a way that's very interrogative, which often is the case because it's just a seller running through his checklist of all his questions that his manager asked him to ask on every sales call because it's a part of the process, it pisses buyers off and it blows the deal. And by the way, buyers are savvy today. And so the problem with that is that because the buyers are savvy today, they know exactly what your tricks are. They know that you're going to ask them about their budget. They know that you're going to ask them if they have the authority to make the decision. And by the way, if you don't get the elements in this new framework that this new framework is going to unveil to you in a clear, codified, waypoint-centric, get the customer to feel this, or the prospective customer to feel this, instead of give you this in the way of information, that's where you win. So this framework was born out of many years of frustration trying to find the perfect concoction to sell like a god, because I was obsessed and still remain to this day obsessed with finding that perfect elixir, the tincture, the nectar from the gods on how to sell like a god. Why? Well, of course, I love making money. Who doesn't? But beyond that, I want to have a positive impact on every one of the buyers and their lives that I touch. And the only way I can do that is if I understand human psychology to such a degree that I can first understand it and have the conscious competency about what it takes to sell perfectly, and then through practice, create and develop the unconscious competency such that when I face a frame collision where my buyer throws 3 different frames at me at one moment, and I gotta parse through the frames like Neo when the scene in the Matrix where he's dodging the bullets, and simultaneously decide which of those frames I'm going to respond to, I need a framework to help me navigate all that, okay? And the beauty of all this, and the this being the new novel sales framework that I'm going to show with you or share with you in this upcoming video series that you're partaking in now, is that it can contain all of those favorite frameworks that you're used to and have grown accustomed to, MEDIC, MEDPIC, etc. But you can set it in a container that's going to give you an overarching macro view of how to run a sales process, okay? So are you ready to start? Awesome, well, buckle in. Let me first start by giving you a tease as to what the framework is. Okay, so first off, this framework seeks to incorporate all the nonverbal elements of a sales process along with the feeling of which you are intending to evoke from your buyer, and then subsequently get them to also share with you candidly what issues they're facing or opportunities they're missing out on, i.e. the problem that they're trying to solve that your solution, your product, or your service solves, and then ultimately how to present information in such a way that it's easily digestible, that they can take that information, run to their boss, run to their manager, run to their wife, run to their husband or whatever, their partner, etc., the board of directors, their committee, and what have you, and relay the information in just as persuasive a manner that you did when you talked to them on the phone initially, okay? Sound like a hell of a promise? Buckle in and I'll let you be the judge of whether or not this delivers. Okay, so what is the framework first off? The framework is 5 things, okay? Number 1, disarm. Number 2, disqualify. Number 3, divulge. Number 4, digest. And number 5, direct. Sound like a cute alliteration? Maybe it is, and that's why it's called the 5D framework. But let me unpack this at a 35,000-foot high-level overview to give you an indication as to why this might be so profound and world-shaking. Okay? Number 1, disarming. If you've read any books by, say, Stephen Covey, The Speed of Trust, or The Trusted Advisor, or any book like that, or have been around as a human being for any amount of time, you know that the currency of a deal is actually trust. And it is trust that is the granite, the bedrock that you have to build your relationships upon. Otherwise, guess what? You don't get no deal. And even if you do get a deal, you're going to end up with buyer's remorse, more than likely. Check out the data on returns, e-com, in person, first-time home buyer regrets, okay? It's rampant. Now it's a multivariate problem that doesn't just entail the way a salesperson sells to a buyer, but that's a pretty big part of it, okay? If you don't have trust, you don't have granite to build a relationship on, and unless you are selling widgets or Red Bull at a 7-Eleven gas station, trust is very damn important because you want to have a repeat customer. You want to avoid churn. You want to keep your retention high with your customers, otherwise you're screwed, okay? So trust is the bedrock, and without that, and if you can't nail that out of the gate and disarm, or by way of disarming your customer, your prospective customer, out of the gate with nonverbals, your tonality, your body positioning, what part of your body you show to prospects when you introduce yourself to them, how you shake their hands, how you touch them, do you go in for the hug? Do you go in for the handshake? How do you communicate the nonverbals or the physicality, like I just showed you with the the handshakes and the like, but how do you do that verbally? How do you verbally give someone a handshake and greet them, okay? There are nuances here to disarmament that are vital, and if you blow these, you blow the deal. And by the way, how do I know that? I just blew a deal today, okay? It's one thing to know this. It's another thing entirely to actually be able to deploy this on the fly when the stakes are high, and maybe your quota for the quarter or that deal that you're trying to get and this potential buyer of your company or your next home that you're selling, if you're a real estate agent, or the next vehicle that you need to sell at the lot to get your manager off your back so that you don't get fired next year, maybe the stakes are high. And if you don't train and find yourself ready to be audible ready in any context, in any circumstance, at any moment, at any time, to be able to disarm your buyer, you're screwed out of the gate before you even sell. And it's even worse on a cold call, by the way, okay? We're gonna get into all the different ways that we can disarm buyers as fast as possible to then cross the chasm of uncertainty where doubt, skepticism, inevitable avoidance from the buyer, reactance, resistance, failures to overcome inertia, and all the like lie, that nasty pit over the bridge of trust, okay? That's the first D. The second is disqualify. So many sellers today in sales books are obsessed with finding the right qualification framework. Maybe it's BANT, maybe it's CHAMP, maybe it's SPIN, maybe it's whatever new shit just came out this year, okay? But fundamentally, all these qualification frameworks get it backwards. Okay? Or worse, the buyer tries to qualify themselves to the seller. Okay? So what if you could take all that and flip it and completely flip it around? In our game currently, with my business, running landscape, maintenance, and interior-scaping, what if instead of getting on a call with the property manager for Class A building and saying, what's your budget, authority, need, and timing? And by the way, let me tell you why we're oh so great. At the start of a meeting, which of course is a terrible way to run a meeting, but to illustrate the point, what if instead you got on the call with them or met them for an in-person meeting, and one of the first things you said to them after disarming them, and created some trust, okay, getting the first D, the second D, you said something to the effect of, so why bother even changing your landscaper? I mean, from what I can tell outside, the property looks great. Why bother? And then compel them to vomit all over you, which this is the third D here, okay? The third D is divulge. How can you evoke in your buyer a degree of trust such, after through disqualifying them, displaying that you're not needy, how can you compel your buyer to be, your prospect? How can you get them in a place of trust where they are dying to divulge all the information to you and tell you everything about why they need your service, what they're actually worried about, what their boss is crawling down their throat about, where they're worried about losing their job, why this purchase decision makes so much pain for them or keeps them up at night, okay, etc. What if you can get them to divulge to you candidly, right? You can't have that divulging from the buyer happen until they trust you, which starts with disarming them, and then B, by disqualifying them, which is conveying that you're not needy, you're high status, etc. That's the third D that we're going to dive into deeply, is divulge. The fourth is digest. Great. So now you know all their problems, you know all their pain, you know their budget, their authority, their need, their timing, whatever other framework you want to use, MEDDIC, MEDPIC, etc. How do you present to them in an easily digestible manner exactly what the hell you do in a way that they can listen to it, take it, understand it, be energized by it, find it exciting, find it persuasive, and be so jacked about it that they run off to their partner, their committee, their board of directors, their partner, their wife, their husband, their grandma, their attorney, whatever, and pitch them in almost as compelling of a way that you did so that you can have an internal champion and actually win the deal. Okay, the way you structure information is very important. And the way we're going to get into that is we're going to start looking at how we can leverage things like you'll find in the psychological codex of cognitive biases and heuristics and memory errors, things like the anchoring bias, the availability heuristic, etc. Okay, the primacy effect and all the rest of it, because the order in which you present information is very important, i.e. how you pitch a product. Now you might be saying, well, I don't pitch a product, or ditch the pitch. You might have seen guys like Jeremy Minor come out with these ideas like ditch the pitch. Sorry to break it to you, bro. Anytime you open your mouth and talk about what you do, you're presenting information about what you do in the most compelling light imaginable. That's a pitch. It's the same damn thing. Now, maybe you're an investment banker and you're pitching a deal, a company, and you're talking about EBITDA and revenue and where the company's going and all the financial metrics and the like, and you might think of that as a pitch. But in my experience, anytime you present information with the intention to persuade the person receiving that information, it's a pitch. Sorry to say, that's the truth. So you better know how to pitch and have it pitchable and presentable in a digestible manner that your buyer can actually digest it and regurgitate it to other people, okay? And then lastly, direct. If you can't control a sales process by setting clearly codified next actions that your buyer has agreed to so that you can avoid playing the infinite chase and follow-up game and actually have control and convey authority, like Cialdini talks about in the book Influence, The Science of Persuasion, one of his pillars of influence, which is authority. How can you convey that without being domineering, annoying, or douchebaggy? These are all things that we're going to unpack. And inside of this is everything that you need to go into any industry and sell like a rock star. And if that sounds interesting to you, subscribe to this channel below and stick around for more.